apologize to Rodney. 2 weeks ago, you left a question at the end of the show, and I totally forgot about it last week, man. I'm sorry. I remembered, so I'm starting you off and hitting Steve with this science question. And this is kind of cool because I don't know a whole lot of other pastors that would be able to even try and answer this, so it's cool that.
Well, we don't know what the question is yet.
you're gonna like it.
Okay.
All right, I've heard you talk about it before. Since the year used to be 360 days long, and now it's 365, do you think the asteroid that they say killed the dinosaurs changed the orbit of the Earth? And the second part is, what changed the length of the year, and do we know when the length of the year changed?
What he's talking about, what Rodney's talking about is in the Old Testament. Actually, it's not just the Old Testament, but all ancient calendars used to be 360-day calendars, including the Egyptian. And a lot of times, I chase this one down, and one of the things that calendar pages will talk about is that the Egyptian calendar always had 365 and a quarter days. And that's not actually true. I chase that one down, and the reference that they use to do that is it doesn't state that, and so that whole thing is ambiguous. The Roman calendar, the Babylonian calendar, all of the calendars that you have, all changed right around about 750, between 700 and 750 BC, and so that's a weird thing. And so the whole idea that I don't know if you guys know this, but 360 degrees in a circle, and that whole thing actually is in connection with the earthly calendar. It came from Babylon. And so there's a problem there, and the problem is this. A lot of times we in our arrogance can think that we're smarter than people in the ancient times, and they didn't know how many days in a year, and we do, and they're stupid, and we've got it together, and that kind of thing. But whenever I talk to people about this, I ask them if they would know how to figure out how many days in a year with nothing. Mm. You don't get to go to you don't get to go to Google or anything like that. You got to prove how many days are in a year. And I have never met anybody who would be able to do that. And it's not a hard proposition. It just has to do with paying attention to where the sun goes down. And so there's a point where the sun goes down at its furthest point south, and another point where it goes down at its furthest point north. You can reverse that and say where the sun comes up, and each one of those points is a half a year. And so wherever the sun's going down, that's going to determine it. And so it's not a hard calculation. It's not hard to figure out. And ancient people knew how to do this, and they knew how to do it much better than most people nowadays. And so the idea that they would have a 360-day calendar and have it wrong is highly unlikely. And so in that case, something changed. And we have evidence of this in the Bible. There are 360 360-day years mentioned in the Bible. In fact, that's the calendar that's used in the book of Revelation. And people have called it the prophetic calendar and that kind of thing. It's also the calendar that was used in the book of Genesis. It's demonstrably so in Genesis chapter 6 through 9.
Wait, the 360 days Genesis and Revelation?
Uh-huh.
And how do we know that?
1,260 days, 3.5 years.
Okay.
42 months, 32 days.
So there's math we're pulling it from.
Yeah. It's in the Bible. So with the Genesis situation, it talks about the fact that for 5 months, it equates 5 months with 150 days. And so there you have a 30-day month. And so 30-day months, times 12 is 360-day year. And so they're using a 360-day year in the book of Genesis. And it looks like that was the case, again, all the way up to 700. Really interesting stuff. And so what Rodney is talking about is what would cause the orbit to change or cause, you only have a couple of options there. And one of the options is that the orbit changed, or another option is that the length of day changed. That's a possibility. Because if you speed up the rotation of the Earth, you get more days in a year. Follow that?
Yeah. Are you going to go to the long day, Joshua?
Yeah.
Okay, so before you get there, when he's talking about, the dinosaurs, that's not even, I mean, that's way earlier than 750 BC, right?
Well,
So they can't connect 360 at
yeah.
that change in the calendar with.
What he's probably doing is, obviously, I don't believe in long ages for the Earth in that sense. Dinosaurs are around in the Bible. There's animals that are mentioned in the Bible that look like they're dinosaurs, and so probably what he's talking about is could that be something that happened during the flood, for example?
Oh, okay.
The Bible talks about the fountains of the great deep breaking up and that kind of thing, and that could change the rotation of the Earth. And so it might be something like that. I'm putting words in Rodney's mouth
Right.
for sure. But in any case, it looks like something's changed. Something's happened here, and there's only a few ways that could take place. One is, like Rodney asked, could there be an asteroid impact that would change the rotation of the Earth? That would have to be a pretty radical impact. And in most models that I have seen, it would have to be so large that it would destroy all life on Earth, and that's probably what he's bringing up in that question, and so I don't know that would be the case because you have obviously civilizations after the flood that are using a 360-day year. It's also used in the book of Daniel, for example. And again, demonstrably so. It's used in the book of Daniel. And so with that, it looks like something else would have to do that. And one of the things that can do something like that is a close flyby of a large body, like a planetary body. There's also a few passages in the Bible that are problematic for people who think that everything's remained the same and that there haven't been large catastrophes. And one of them is the long day of Joshua that Matt mentioned. There's a whole day that the sun didn't go down in the book of Joshua. There is another instance of cosmic events during the time of Hezekiah when the sun actually went backwards 12 degrees, and that's interesting. And so, how do you get that to happen? And again, there's different ideas on that. It can be refraction of light, and I think that's really iffy. It could be again, God could just do it supernaturally. You could have him stop the rotation of the Earth. But the rotation of the Earth at the equator is 1,000 miles per hour, right around there. It's about 25,000 miles around, and so 24 hours, 25,000 miles. It's close to 1,000 miles an hour at the equator. You stop a planet, and you have momentum. Oceans would be going over their boundaries and things like that. Stuff like that could happen. And admittedly, God could slow it down. And do it that way. Another option is that the Earth tilts, and that obviously we're in Washington right now. The days are getting much shorter, and they're going to get much less than 12 hours for daylight hours when we get down to the time around Christmas. And in the summer, we have much more than 12 hours. For daylight hours. The days get longer in the summer and shorter in the winter, and it's only in spring and fall that you have a split day, 12 hours and 12 of daylight and 12 hours of night. And that has to do with the tilt of the Earth. When our hemisphere is tilting towards the sun, you get a longer day. And one of the things that can cause an axis tilt is a close flyby of a planetary object, something large. And that may be the case with the long day of Joshua. There's a whole book that was written about that. But in any case, something slowed down the day. Another effect of that would be you can change orbits. This is what we do with probes that we send out into space. If we want something to get quickly out into the range of the outer solar system, we have a flyby of Venus, for example. You shoot a probe in towards the sun, towards Venus, have it make a close flyby towards Venus, and what happens is there's a slingshot effect that takes place. And so some of Venus's momentum gets bled off into the satellite. And this just has to do with the conservation of energy. And so you shoot a satellite by Venus or a probe by Venus, it will speed up and Venus will slow down. And it's incrementally, it's a very small amount for Venus to slow down, and it's a very large amount for the satellite to speed up, but that's because of the relative mass. And when you talk about doing that with large bodies, you can have some really radical changes that take place, and so that might be the case. That's one possibility. And so the change in a calendar, as far as a calendar year goes, and also the long day of Joshua, and even the turning back of the sundial during the time of Hezekiah can be explained by a flyby of a large object. And so one option. In any case, what we do know is that when you look back at ancient calendars, they used to be 360-day calendars, and then there was a period of time when all calendars on the planet were in an uproar, trying to figure out how the calendars should be numbered, and then finally we settled down to a 365-day calendar. So.
Yeah, and you did a flyby, so to speak, no pun intended, on that. But like you said, there's a whole book written on that, and it's really cool because when you're talking about the long day of Joshua, what the Lord did there, and things like I want to say off the top of my head, like there was a Mark Twain book or something, but they documented like things on the planet of Mars.
That was Gulliver's Travels. Yeah.
That you couldn't see. With the technology they had back then.
Yeah.
And then like Mars, being the god of war, and they were deathly afraid of this planet. And there's just all these things that some of it's anecdotal, but there's a lot to the long day of Joshua. It's really cool.
Yeah, there's some really interesting things about planetary objects and the mythologies that you have in ancient Greece, and actually all the ancient mythologies. So for example, I don't know if I want to get into that. Brightest planet in the sky is Venus, and the second brightest planet in the sky is Jupiter. And Jupiter is called Jupiter was the head of the gods. He was the top god in all ancient mythologies. And he's called Zeus and Jupiter, and in other languages they use completely different terms, but Jupiter has always been connected with that. Mars has always been the god of war. There's some evidence that Venus, you just don't see Venus in ancient writings up until about 1500 BC, which is really weird. Because Venus again is the brightest star that it's literally the brightest star that you have in the sky at times, and it's certainly the brightest planet. And so, there's some interesting things with that. And the early solar system may have been a much different place than what we've got now. So, interesting things.